design, and the chap who was my lecturer there was interested in puppetry, so he introduced me to puppets, and I just loved it. I thought, well, this is what I want to do. And then I was very lucky when I left. I got a job with Norwich Puppet Theatre, so I learned how to operate marionettes and rug puppets and shadow puppets, and worked there for a while. And then, well, as you know, then I had a lucky break, and Jerry Anderson, I went to go and see him, and he took me on for Terrorhawks. So
and was that your first professional?
That was my first television job. But I worked for Norwich Puppet Theatre in theatre, but it was the first
television job.
Television film.
That's amazing. How did that feel to get thrown into that?
Oh, I couldn't believe it, because as a child, I'd watched Thunderbirds and all of the Jerry Anderson different things, a Stingray, and as a child I liked Marina, who obviously she was silent, wasn't she? She never spoke, and she looked terribly glamorous, and I thought this all looked amazing. It's quite interesting, because now, of course, I'm still a puppeteer, but I'm also a storyteller, so I'm not exactly silent. But it was just like suddenly I was working for this hero of mine, so it was just a wonderful opportunity.
And growing up, you must have watched the Anderson programmes on TV.
I did. Oh, yes, I watched them all, and you had Joe Knighty and Thunderbirds and Stingray, and they're just incredible, and they still are. They've the test of time is that they've come back again and again. In fact, my daughter also loved Thunderbirds, so yes, I did, and that's probably one of the things that inspired me. There was a lot of different things as well, Pinky and Perky as well. I remember watching, and Sooty and
Tinker and Tucker, was that popular?
Oh, no, I think
tingly from my mind.
I think I'm a bit too young. I think.
Oh, yes, that was my generation. So, what was your favourite of the public programmes when you were growing up?
I think it probably was Thunderbirds, actually. I think it was, although I liked the underwaterness of Stingray. I thought it looked beautiful as a child. So yeah, it was hard to choose between them, really. Yeah.
Well, that's a good point to introduce Mary. Mary, who everyone knows, Mary Turner. Mary, how did you get into puppetry?
Well, it started a long time before Judy started in puppetry. I was brought up on it, really, because it was my mother who started off. After the Second World War, people were looking for different things to do. She was an artist, and there was a puppet class starting off in a local polytechnic, so she thought she'd go along and see what it was like. And from there she made a lot of puppets, built up a show, and we went, by that time I was old enough to work them, we went round to schools and parties with these puppets. They were a bit smaller than this one, they were about that size then, and we had a proscenium and a stage, and we had to cart around as well, and we did quite a lot of work locally. That's how I started, and then after that I went to art school for study sculpture, and I didn't think there was anything doing as a career in puppets at that time, so I did a couple of years teaching. And then Jerry Anderson's firm had started up, and they'd already done Twizzle, and I belonged to the Puppet Guild, where Christine Glanville was as well. And they were looking for more puppeteers for the next series, which was Torchy. And I went along for an interview and got a job. And that's how I actually started on the film puppets.
So that would have been around 1960, if you don't mind saying, or thereabouts, wouldn't it? Late 1950s, 1960s.
Late 50s.
Yeah, late 50s.
Late 50s.
I was being generous. And then you stayed with the Anderson Productions all the way through to Secret Service.
Yes.
And your role grew, really, as the productions went on.
Yes. At first I was assistant to Christine, and then the filming went into 2 stages rather than just working on one stage. Can't remember which series that was. Stingray, probably. So then I was heading one group, and Christine was heading another group. When it came to making the Thunderbird films for the cinema, we were making those alongside the series as well. And I became more of a supervisor then, because everything had to be coordinated together with doing the film and the series at the same time.
And how did you find that? Were you happy doing that, or were you happier being a puppeteer?
No, I was happy doing that. I was working the puppets sometimes, because if there's a crowd shop, they need a lot of puppeteers. I enjoyed doing that as well.
Mary's been a little bit modest because you got into sculpting as well, big style. A lot of the most famous characters were sculpted by yourself, weren't they?
Yes, well, before the series was filmed, we spent about 3 months making characters, and I made Lady Penelope, as you can see.
And what's the story of Lady Penelope and how she looks, Mary?
How she looks? Well, I was asked to model a beautiful lady who was she was an actual lady.
And who would approve the sculpts? Who used to sign the sculpts?
Sylvia Anderson used to come and overlook what we were doing while we were modelling them. So I modelled what I thought was a beautiful lady, and then Sylvia would come along and say, "Well, can you alter it a little bit like this and a little bit like that?" In the end, it became like Sylvia herself somehow. But we didn't realise it.
Did Sylvia like it? Sylvia liked it.
Oh, she approved of it, yes.
It's a beautiful puppet and everybody loves it. And you didn't just do Lady Penelope, did you? Marina, that Judy mentioned earlier.
Yes, and Troy Tempest.
Steve Zodiac?
Steve Zodiac. It's hard to remember them all.
Captain Scarlet?
Captain Scarlet, yes, and a couple of the angels.
Father Unwin? I've studied this. Father Unwin?
Father Unwin, yes.
Which one were you most proud of?
Lady Penelope, I think. But Father Unwin said that he was pleased with his head.
Yes, so. Fantastic likeness. It must be really strange all these years on when you see the image of Lady Penelope particularly, and she's still on posters and in adverts and everything. How does that make you feel 50 years on?
Amazed more than anything that she's still on the go.
Yeah. So, when as your role grew in the studio, there were other people who came into the production. Did they sort of come from the Puppet Guild side of things, or there was a chap called Wolfgang Manthe?
Well, he's actually my brother-in-law.
And he was involved in Stingray, wasn't he?
Yes, and my sister was there at the same time, Carolyn.
Oh, was she? I didn't realise.
Turner.
Yeah.
Yes, they were both there for a shortish time.
Fantastic. And so, after the Anderson productions came to an end, and then there was a break, we went into Terrorhawks, but there's obviously a common denominator between you guys is that you both work with Christine.
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
So how did you know her, Judy?
So Christine came in on Terrorhawks, and I'm very grateful to Christine. She taught me so many tricks of trade. She taught me how to make wigs the right size, to shrink them down to fit puppets. She taught me how to make the puppets' eyes shine with a bit of glycerine, and so I learnt a huge amount. So I'm very indebted to her help, because I still today use some of the things that she taught me. So she was there all the way through Terrorhawks, and actually remained a friend of mine until sadly she passed away. So she was there for all of the Terrorhawks series.
I only ever met her once at an exhibition, but she was such a character. You must have some stories you can share with us.
She started off as she was a professional puppeteer.
Yes.
On the stage before she went to do the Anderson films.
Yes, it was cabaret, wasn't it? And so she was she certainly was quite a character, and she always had interesting clothes, and she was very flamboyant, and the most fantastic laugh, I always thought.
Yeah,
she was. She was a very generous woman too, because she was happy to share all of her knowledge with you. So from my point of view, that's just really good news.
So there you are, as a freshly graduated into the world of TV puppeteer, and Christine comes along, and what was it? What was she telling you, Judy? What was
well, it was just sort of things like, you know, little kind of tips on how you can make. Well, one of the examples is we had, I don't know if you know, on of course you all know Terrahawks, but the monsters were fantastic, weren't they? And so they had to drool, and we had to make sure we got the right things to make them drool successfully and that look a bit revolting.
How do you make them drool?
So what Christine said to me is, actually, I know a really, really good way to make green drool. And I said, what are we going to use, Christine? Because we don't want the paint to come off the puppet. So he said, it's very simple, Judy. You just use Swarfiga and KY jelly mixed together. So that was the gungeon drool that would come out.
How did you discover that works?
I don't know how she discovered how it worked. That was one of her tips.
So which characters did you operate? Were you
I was a floor puppeteer, so I was involved in all of the puppets. And so basically the Terrahawks puppets worked by, you had two little finger stools in the bottom jaw. So as you heard the voice tape, you moved the bottom jaw accordingly, which was very different to most of the other schools of puppetry at the time. So I went on to work for Henson's, and of course they worked with your thumb in the bottom jaw like that. So then the eyes as well, I was doing the remote controls for the eyes, so you had to kind of really tune into the puppeteers because you couldn't see them because they were in like a swimming pool pit underneath, and you had to be really tuned into which way you thought they were going to turn their head. I mean, sometimes you knew, but sometimes they do a surprise gesture, and you have to try and anticipate where they were going, because otherwise, if the eyes went the wrong way, then the puppets kind of look drunk, because actually it's always the eyes that lead. So you had to try and be one step ahead of all of that, and I also had to be responsible for making sure the hair was nice and smooth. You want the hair sticking up all over the place, especially if you're doing any sort of chroma key work or anything like that. So I was doing all that, and then also, as you were saying, with the crowd scenes, sometimes I had to be on board to do any of the puppets where, you know, there was, so there was 5 of us. If there's 5 puppets, then I did whatever one needed to be doing, really. So I used to do that sister quite a bit, you know, with a funny wig that moved and was, you know, quite hysterical. And
one of the things that always jumps out at me when I see pictures from both different setups in the studios is how awkward and painful it looks to be a puppeteer. I wouldn't fancy either of it. You guys and Terrahawks look crammed underneath something.
Yeah, and also if you just sort of put your hands above your head like this, you know, even with no weight on the end, after a very short period of time your arms become really, really tired. And of course, actually people, the directors on top of the stage can't see the puppeteers, and sometimes do it like this for ages. And then you kind of go, oh, well, they're not doing this, you take your arm down. They go, can you put your puppets up again? And so physically, you have to be quite strong.
And Mary, you guys are dangling off what looks like the most precarious piece of scaffolding for hours on end.
It was called a bridge.
Was it?
Over the set. And we had to lean out over that to work the puppets that way.
And that was, for how many hours was that?
Well, we worked from 8:30 to 5:30, I think. In those days. Longer if we were behind, of course.
And that was done with the TV monitor, wasn't it? So you could see what the action looked like on the floor. What was that like to work with?
Well, we had the puppet down there, of course, on 8-foot strings. And the monitor was in front of us here, so we had to look quickly from one to the other to make sure the puppet was where it should be and doing what it should do.
Can I just ask a question about that?
Yeah.
Did you use a reverse scan monitor?
Yes.
You did as well, yes.
So that monitor had to be reversed for us to see. I'm not quite sure of the reason, but it's because we were to the other side of the camera or something.
Yes, so that you're working to a mirror image.
Yeah.
So it's as if you were working in a mirror, because otherwise everything's round the wrong way.
Yeah.
Which was quite interesting because Henson's didn't do that, and I found that really difficult because you're going the wrong way. It's all right if the camera's from behind you, but if the camera's in front. So even today I always I carry a little mirror with me, so if you've got a reverse scan monitor you can actually put a mirror in front of your
and one thing that you mentioned, Judy, was how fascinated you were watching Marina and the underwater scenes. Do you remember how was Marina operated underwater there?
Well, there was a narrow glass tank in front of her, quite big, and at one time it did actually burst with all the water in it.
Really?
And Marina was the other side of the tank, so that the camera was filming through the water to Marina, and she was strung so that she could be sort of horizontal, swimming behind that.
Amazing. And there was fish in it as well, wasn't there?
Yes, some real fish, yes.
I don't want to think what happened when it burst and all the fish. I've got this fish in my mind, little fish everywhere. Let's not think about it. And so we haven't got very long, and we could speak for hours, but you both had very successful careers after working on the Anderson programmes as well. Mary, when the studios finished in '69, you went straight on and did Rupert.
Almost straight on.
It seemed like straight on to me, but I was only 3.
Yeah.
How long was the gap? About 2 years, 18 months, something like that, was it?
About 18 months, I think, yeah.
And how did that come about, Rupert?
The ATV company had got the rights to make the toys, I think, from the Daily Express, and they decided that then they wanted to make a series of Rupert, and they got permission from the Express, and then of course they were looking for somebody to do it. Well, I was in partnership with John Reed, who'd also worked on the Thunderbirds and all of those puppets. And so they came to us because they knew that we'd already done all the other series. And that's how we came to do it.
And it was, I'm speaking most people in the room, certainly of my age, everybody loved it. I had such fond memories of that show.
It's just come out on DVD as well.
Yeah, and you made quite a lot of episodes. There was over 70 episodes, wasn't there?
Yeah.
So was that done in different blocks? There was a spread
yes,
over a few
we made 26.
Yeah.
And then the powers that be said, oh, well, we can show that to generations of children. We don't need any more. So luckily we stored all the stuff, and because it wasn't long before they came back and said they wanted 26 more. And so it went on from there. They found that they could sell it well, I think. Was the reason.
And what you went on to do after, was it Clopper Castle? Was after?
No, it was Mumphy.
Right, yes, Mumphy.
Mumphy the elephant.
Yeah.
Then it was Clopper Castle. Mumphy was from a book, but we kept trying to do our own stories, but it's difficult to get your own stuff on. But eventually they let us do Clopper Castle. But then after that they got hold of another thing called Munch Bunch, which was a lot of fruit characters, so we had to do that.
And you can still buy yogurts with Munch Bunch on, so they might owe you a bit of copyright there.
In those days you didn't get anything for copyright.
So for 20 years, children growing up in Britain were loving your programmes and influenced by what you created.
That's
which is a huge impact on popular culture. And Judy, you went from Anderson and you went to another iconic studio.
Yes, I was very lucky. I went to some auditions and Jim Henson asked me if I'd join the Muppet team on some of the Muppet movies. So I worked on Muppet Treasure Island, Muppet Christmas Carol. I worked on Labyrinth for David Bowie, which was fantastic.
Did you meet Bowie?
Yes, I did actually. He was great because.
Hang on. Put everything back for another hour. Tell us about David Bowie, Judy.
Well, he was. The thing was, he wanted to be with everybody, and so he didn't have his makeup and dressing table in a private dressing room. He had his dressing table just on the side of the set.
Because he has a background in mime and theatre. Right?
Exactly, and he was just such a lovely, friendly man, and he was funny, and there was also, on Labyrinth, there was a lot of little people on that, and he was very friendly with them, and always talking to puppeteers, and I don't know, it was just a wonderful experience.
Sounds amazing.
It was really good. And then I worked on Little Shop of Horrors, which was quite good fun, and then what happened was at one point they asked me if I would do a front character called Snoot the Seal for a programme called Fun Factory, and this was for their Saturday morning show, and it was a company called Sky TV, and I thought, I've never heard of Sky TV, and everyone was going, why are you doing that? Sky TV will never come to anything. But actually, I did 5 years on Fun Factory in the early days of Sky, and I also did their under 5s programme. I was a Scottish mouse, not Scottish actually, no, I was Liverpudlian. I was a Liverpudlian little mouse, that's right, called Yummy Tickle Mouse for, the DJ Cat Show. And that was brilliant, it was really good fun. And I enjoy that because I do voices as well. And clearly on Terrorhawks and everything, the way Jerry worked, he had actors doing the voices and then the puppeteers, but actually...
So you work into a pre-recorded soundtrack?
Exactly, whereas an awful lot of the other television I did, I was doing the voices as well, which is very nice, so yeah.
And we skipped all over Henson, didn't we? And you just had so many amazing experiences working with the Henson team. So which characters were you operating over?
Well, the main characters on the Henson team were the American puppeteers who'd come over. So we were kind of actually pretty much rent-a-crowd, but actually I did stand in for Fozzie Bear quite a few times, but we were doing shots of Fozzie Bear, which was quite nice, so it was a little bit of a thing to play Fozzie Bear. But it was really good. So another name to mention is Rick Mail.
Yeah.
He did a series for Channel 4 called Grim Tales, and he had an animated chair that had little claws on that were moving and everything. Yeah. And I was that chair. So yeah, I spent a lot of time literally sitting underneath Rick Mail, my arms sort of. So that was quite good fun.
And you've both carried on working, and you're both still working as puppeteers. Go back to Mary, you were working recently on the new Thunderbirds productions that have been done.
Yes,
tell us about your involvement in those.
Well, I wasn't there for very many days, just doing a bit of working.
Didn't you make some new characters, sculpt some new characters for the adverts as well?
Oh,
people have seen the Parker advert, Halifax advert. Yeah.
Did the girl on the skis. But originally, I modelled the head. Originally, she was supposed to be a hula hula girl, but for some reason or other, that was abandoned, and she ended up on the skis.
So still making Thunderbird-style puppet characters to this day. Yeah. And yourself, Judy, you're still busy puppeteering?
Yes, I've got a small company called Fabulous Fables, and it's storytelling, but also using puppetry. And I work a lot for the Natural History Museum and various big organisations doing their children's programmes for schools. I'm going to be at Natural History Museum the first Monday in half term. If any of you got children looking for something to do, doing a show called Wolf Tales.
Onslaught of people after autographs from Thunderbirds piling and kids going in.
And I also recently did a little television shoot with a historical George Bernard Shaw puppet with Darryl Warby, who's somewhere here today, and Darryl worked on Calling Elvis. Does anyone remember the Calling Elvis video? Yeah, he worked on that. And this was for the thing that we worked on together was for a little documentary all about George Bernard Shaw, who originally wrote a puppet play called Shakespeare versus Shaw. So there was two marionettes, one of Shakespeare and one of Shaw. And in this documentary, I'm not sure when it's coming out, we shot it. It was being shot all over the place, but some of it was shot at Shaw Corner, which is National Trust building. And so the idea was to have little images of this puppet watching and listening and just being kind of little presence, ghostly presence of George Bernard Shaw. So that's another thing to write in.
We are, as always, tight on time, but is there any questions that we could invite from anyone in the audience? Would anyone like to ask a question of Judy or Mary? Yes, Anna there.
The answer to Judy is, would you have liked to work on the programmes at Mary back in the 60s and 70s?
Well, I think, I would have done, but obviously, I was a kid. Yeah, but obviously, they are iconic programmes. It's a very different style of puppetry, and I think things move forward and move on and evolve in different ways. And so some of the techniques that you were using, I ended up using in theatre later on, so, obviously it's lovely, and sometimes I do get the opportunity to do something with marionettes linked to that kind of thing.
I think one of the interesting things about the shows in the 60s, particularly as they progress, is as a kid I didn't think of them as puppet shows.
No.
Whereas with like the Henson shows, the Muppet shows, you love them just as much, but they're puppet shows and they're using puppets as puppets. But with the Anderson shows, it was almost like, well, it became more and more a case of make puppets not look like puppets and look more like human. And certainly as a child, I didn't make any distinction that I was watching. It didn't register really. I just accepted it for what it was and didn't think of them as a puppet show. It's almost a completely different style of puppetry. Well, it is a completely different style.
Yeah.
I suppose that was why it was because the Andersons were in the live action world for the filming that they did, and they carried that on into the puppets.
Yeah.
I think also Jerry didn't really intend to get into puppetry, did he? So I think he was interested in special effects, and he was interested in making shows about science fictiony. And it was originally, I think, it became iconic because he thought it was a cheap way of doing things, I think.
And some of the shows, I mean, I say to this day, Captain Scarlet's not a kid's show. It's just an adult show made with puppets, and it's dark. And my kids are in here somewhere, and they'll say that I say, you don't get this on CBBC as he machine guns someone off a wall or something like that. It's nothing like a modern children's programme at all.
Well, also I think on Terrorwalk said that was a departure in the writing because that's very funny, but some of the comedy is actually very adult too. Some of the puns and things like that would go way over a child's
And the
head.
whole love triangle in Stingray with Troy and Atlanta, it's not. Have we got time for a few more questions? I'm struggling to see if you're at the back, so you're at a disadvantage. Sorry. Yes, sir.
Just wondered if either of you use puppets outside of entertainment, because I know they use puppetry a lot in various therapies. Have any of you ventured into anything like that?
I haven't. I don't know. Judy?
Well, I suppose the thing is what I'm doing at the Natural History Museum is it's not quite what you're talking about, but I do use puppets to educate about the natural world, and also I work for the London Museum of Steam and Water, so I'm using storytelling and puppetry to entertain, but also to teach science as well. So I'm fusing education with puppetry, which is, very often, in schools and things, teachers use puppets in that sort of way. But I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the sort of therapeutic aspect, possibly.
Yeah, well, that sort of thing as well. People who use it for all sorts of different things. Talk via a puppet, do a story via a puppet.
Well, exactly, and I think there's been a real resurgence. I was talking about this earlier. An interest in puppetry through things like Warhorse, which suddenly it's not perceived by people as an art form which is just for children. It is part of mainstream theatre now, and I think there's a lot of people who are just very interested in the whole craft and techniques of puppetry. I don't know if you agree with me. There's a resurgence of interest.
Yes.
Again, I mean, I've got 2 kids, and they definitely react more warmly to physical items on screen than computer animation. And I think that fits in with a movement back to physical puppetry, not just for like with what you're doing with groups in a live situation, but for TV as well. I think there is a move back towards it, and there's a move back to practical effects. And a whole separate debate that we've had. There's a chap I can just see through the glare in a white shirt who's patiently put his hand up. Yes, sir.
Can I give you a mic? Sorry. Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Testing.
Yes.
Judy. Just to mention, you mentioned Sky. I hadn't really heard of it myself, but millions have. And we have got it, I'm sure. But there is an excellent programme on Sky Arts called Made in Supermarionation. And there was an interview with Mary, Jamie Anderson, and a number of other people, possibly filmed around about 2 or 3 years ago at Islet Park, and really is in-depth information. It's on Sky Arts and it's called Made in Supermarionation. I mean, I've kept mine. Thankfully they haven't erased it yet, but if no one here has seen it, it really is worth watching.
Oh, thank you for that.
That was the documentary that Stephen Riviere did that went on to give the impetus for the three
Going
new
back to the old
episodes.
studios where we worked.
Yeah.
Just in our last couple of minutes, Mary has kindly offered to get Lady Penelope up and moving for us, which is fantastic. So, Mary, this is an original Lady Penelope puppet that you saved from the studios.
She's got her finger caught in her dress.
So can you tell us about what you're doing to operate her? What strings has she got, and what's the trick to make it come alive?
Well, she's got three head strings, one in the front and two at the back.
So on the puppet heads I've seen, they've actually got another two holes. Is that where the current came down into the solenoid? When it was the current coming down on wires as well? So the solenoid, which was done. Yeah. Right. So did you ever get a shock from doing that? It's about 40 volts, wasn't it? So when the puppeteers were operating a puppet like this, there was actually 40 volts coming down some of those strings, which were also operating the electronics. And then at the front, there's two wires coming to the arms.
The arms. She hasn't got any leg strings on.
And those puppets to the arms are coming into, are they gaps in the fingers on the hand that she's wiring into?
They're going to just after the first finger.
And one of the things that I was surprised when I saw her, there's no strings to the actual puppet body at all, apart from the hands, are there? The whole weight is taken by the head?
On the head, yes. Puppets, stage puppets very often have many more strings, but because the strings weren't supposed to be showing, we had to have as few strings as possible.
They had to be dusted down, the strings, didn't they, to stop them shining sometimes?
Yes, they were sprayed with anti-spray and sometimes painted with black paint.
So when you see a lot of the surviving original puppet heads now, if they're blonde haired, they've got a sort of bluey sheen to the blonde hair, which is the poster paint that was sprayed.
Yeah, yes.
She's amazing.
How much does a puppet weigh, and how much did the sort of, when you had the 8-foot strings, did that increase the weight significantly?
I have no idea how much they weigh. I've never weighed them.
They're very light, aren't they? They're very light, having picked her up. She's not as heavy as you would expect, and not as heavy as a lot of the replicas that
she's heavy enough when you're on 8-foot strings.
Didn't you have to put G-clamps on the bottom of them sometimes?
Oh, sometimes, to keep the feet steady.
You can see photos from the studio, and there's little G-clamps attached to the bottom of the legs, particularly on Captain Scarlet, to presumably stop them.
Well, yes, because they were more difficult to work than these ones, because they were tall and thin and had small heads.
Yes, the scale of those was really quite tiny.
Yes, it was.
So I guess you could operate that much more like a puppet than you could a Scarlet one, because the movements have got to be so much more subtle with the Scarlet era puppets, haven't they?
Yeah.
That's absolutely beautiful. Has everyone had a chance to take a photo?
Can I just ask, were some of the models actually sold off when they finished making the programs? They were sold off for Captain Blacks, Captain Scarlets, and all that.
From my knowledge as a collector, most of them were given away to people who worked at the studios or binned, tragically. Because I don't think people had any appreciation. Certainly, I don't think that people who managed the studio had any appreciation of just something I find amazing, because they would have been valuable to people then.
Yeah.
It's not just something that would have happened now.
I was just going to say the production values on the Jerry Anderson. You don't get anything like that on television today. I mean, there was so much hard work went into everything from the model department, and
one series was finished, and that was the end of it. There were no DVDs or anything like that. And so everything was just abandoned and on to the next one.
I know you saved quite a lot of them, Mary, because those are the ones that went through the famous Philip auction, Phillips auction in the
Yes.
mid-90s, wasn't it? But
Well,
lots and lots of other ones just didn't survive. Or
The only reason we saved those was that when the studio had packed up, John and I were invited to go and see if there was anything that we could make use of. And on the offices at the front of the building were built across the front, and they had flat roofs inside. And that's where all the puppets were just thrown about. And the reason we took some of them was because we wanted the solenoids for the series that we were doing. we weren't worried about the characters or anything like that.
get the bits out and smash them.
That's how those were saved. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. I think we're on the end of our time. I've really enjoyed that. It's lovely to speak to you both. Can we show our appreciation?